Hello, I'm Tom Stapledon, and I've got another talk and slideshow here on behalf of the Friends Williamson's Tunnels. This time, the talk is going to be about Williamson's own house, 40 to 44 Mason Street, or rather, what was there during the period of 1996 to 1999, long after Williamson's house had been demolished in 1936. But at the time when FoWT was just getting going and the research into Joseph Williamson was underway, and it was probably about 1997, I would imagine, when it first became apparent from some of the research that was being done that there was something very interesting going on underneath this old garage site in Mason Street, where we knew Joseph Williamson's own house had been. His three-story Georgian house had stood from about 1810, we think, until it was demolished in 1936 by a garage business who took over the premises and immediately demolished the house. And they put up new buildings which covered the whole site. And by the time we got there, this is all that was left. The buildings, which had been Willie's garage, had been vacated by them sometime in the 1970s, and then another business took over, T. Hill and Company. You can just see the hill there left on the side wall. Looking very dilapidated now. Quite a large set of buildings stretching right back to the back of the plot, way back behind the Williamson house. And the asbestos roof is disintegrating and falling apart on there. And it's ripe for demolition in the 1990s. So Hills took over this in the 70s, and I think they were there until probably the mid-1990s. And I think they were running some kind of a garage business as well, but by the end it was more to do with being a tire dealer, I believe. And so this is what it looked like by the time they'd vacated the building. Tires strewn everywhere. The place is a real mess inside. Now, we know what it looked like, not because we were allowed in, not because we were invited in, but because FoWT members in the early days were more like urban explorers. They had realized what lay in there, heard stories, knew there was something very interesting going on below ground underneath that building, and they found their way in. Mostly it was a question of coming up the road with a pair of ladders and climbing over a high gate and fence surreptitiously, but they obviously got away with it in those days. And this is the big wooden doors on the front, hiding what appears to be an archway on the outside. Not at all sure whether it was an archway in Williamson's day or whether it was just a feature. We'll never really know about that. But this is what it ended up looking like. I don't believe these doors had been used for many, many years by the time these photographs were taken in around 1997 and 98. That's what it looked like from the outside. The arch there looks like it could have been designed as an archway, driveway in through to the rear of the property for Joseph Williamson's horse and carriage to drive through, but I'm rather doubtful about that. Some of the paintings I've seen appeared to show it as a door inside that arch, so it may have just been a feature. Here we are now in 1997. I think this was during a visit by a group from the Grosvenor Caving Club in Chester, who came up at our invitation to have a look at the accessible tunnels down at the stable yard on Smithdown Lane, which were the first ones to be discovered when the interest in Joseph Williamson and his tunnels was first rekindled. But we knew about this house site as well, and that there was something interesting under there. So we've obviously, at this time, brought a group from the Grosvenor Caving Club up the street, coming equipped with ladders to climb over the fence and inside the property. And inside there were 4 holes in the concrete floor of the garage building. In the garage days, I think they just had a piece of old sheet steel slid over the top of them and nothing more. So anybody could have got access, and we did at that time. Later on, after the building was demolished, Liverpool City Council, who owned the site, put strong steel hatches in place and padlocked them down to keep everybody out. But when we got in those days, this was the first way in to get down to the main chamber that lies below where Williamson's house was, the banqueting hall, as it was named. And this was an entrance that we now call hatch number 2. We've only used this hatch really in recent years for pulling up the spoil with the hoist and buckets from way down below, 30 feet below in the banqueting hall, to bring the spoil up to the surface. But when they first discovered this place, the entrance that we now use was very much less accessible and much more full of rubbish. This is bad enough. I think it takes 3 ladders here to get down, short ladders, but in various stages, to slide down this great heap of debris that's been poured down over many years just to get rid of it because the space was there. And that went down on top of demolition rubble much earlier. And that's where it leads down to. It's what we call the Gothic arch, a lovely Gothic arch high up in the side wall of the banqueting hall. And that would have been 2 or 3 ladders to get you down to there. And then there's a slide down, steep slope down to the lower part of the banqueting hall below. It doesn't look nearly as big as it actually is now that we've emptied it, of course, with so much rubble in there. The spoil heaps were enormous. And as you can see, loads and loads of debris just chucked down there by all the people who occupied the site, and just realised there were these unused spaces below ground and just tipped all their rubbish. Didn't make it a very friendly place to be, quite honestly. And there was no lighting, of course, so it was pitch black in there, just the light from your torches as you went down there. They did try doing photography. I'm not sure that it was very successful, but photographs were taken like this, and they show up what it looked like in those days before any work was done to try and clear it, because we weren't allowed to do anything in the early days. From about 1998, 99 onwards, I think we were allowed a couple of times a year to borrow the keys for the hatches and take groups of our members down below to show them what we've discovered down there. And looking towards the main spoil heap in the banqueting hall, that runs up to the end where Mason Street is, and the frontage of Williamson's house stands directly above where these people are standing. There isn't even room to stand up there on the top at this point, and it stayed like that for many, many years. But you could run up the side wall there, and it was great to crouch on the top, look back and take a photograph looking right along the full length of the banqueting hall and the gash at the far end, which is a narrow passage that we now use to get in and out. There's our Bill Douglas, one of our founder members, trying to take photographs. Probably not nearly as successful as it would be today. Cameras have moved on a long way. But that's halfway up the spoil heap, looking back towards the gash down there. So a couple of photos here, which I think look quite dramatic. The reason they look dramatic is that they've been salvaged from slides, and the slides are starting to deteriorate. So I copied them before they became unusable. And the colouring is very strange, but it shows up what the banqueting hall looks like quite nicely. So I put them in here. There's a group of people standing in the entrance to the gash. As you walk out of the banqueting hall, you go quite steeply up the slope at the back there, round a corner to the left at the top, and then you find yourself in the sandstone chamber at the top, and then another ladder to get up to the surface. But this is at the point where the gash empties out into the banqueting hall. But all that debris stayed there right up until about 2013, when we were allowed to first start doing a little bit of clearance work. It didn't make it at all easy for to find anywhere sort of safe for our visitors to stand when they came down in here. Jagged bits of metal and all sorts of things to fall over, and no level ground at all. But that's part of the excitement, and people enjoyed going down there and seeing it. This one's taken in the sandstone chamber, and we hadn't done very much clearance there. They're quite up close to the roof of this lovely little chamber with the sandstone block roof, different from the banqueting hall, which of course is a brick roof. In the foreground, where the photographer's standing, there is a hatch high up in the ground above this end, and we had to drop a long ladder down to get into this sandstone chamber. And from there, you slipped around the corner there, where Les Coe is standing, another one of our founder members. And going back the way he's come, you go around the corner there, get into the gash, and all the way down to the banqueting hall. And directly above him, where you can see the lights coming down, high up there is the hatch in the ground. The ladder's been removed for the sake of the photograph, I think, here at the moment. But that's where our ladder would come down that brought people down. And in later years, we had to fix everybody up in a harness to go down in here with fall arrest equipment. Now we move on to 1999, and Liverpool City Council made the decision to demolish the building. I don't think there was anything worth saving, but we didn't get any warning that this was going to happen. Just found out one day that the demolition crew had moved in. And at this point, a lot of the building has already been removed. This is the frontage of Joseph Williamson's own house, only 2 stories of it left. And they've modified it to make a peaked roof here. But this was actually a 3-story building in Williamson's day. And where this section of building stands in the process of being demolished, this is where the house next door stood, number 44 Mason Street. And this one had obviously been completely demolished by the garage people when they knocked the rest of the building down in 1936. We really don't know why they left this piece of the frontage standing, just this piece and nothing else. But they did, and it's still there to this day, although it's quite a miracle that it's still standing, really. Looking inside, you can see everything else is gone now. Those wooden doors are still there. They haven't been removed yet. That was to be boarded up eventually, but that's where we used to climb over with 2 ladders to get inside here in the early days before we were actually allowed to come in. Some kind of a steel plate of some description here is over one of the hatches, and over to one of the openings, which later had a lockable hatch. And this is the one that we used to use to go down into an area called the wine bins, which was part of the basement rooms below Williamson's house. Looking back on the site, that's where that opening is, where you could get down into the wine bins. You can see part of the side wall is still there, and some of this steel work. And behind at the back there are 2 bays. You can just see the remains of the 2 end walls of the double bay building, which stretched all the way to the back of the site. Looking inside the wine bins in those days when we first discovered it, this is what it looked like. More tyres left over from Mr. Hill and Co. You're looking there at the what we call the wine bins, which we later put in wooden wine racks, 1, 2, 3 bays there. And we filled them full of wine bottles, and they were used as a film set for the filming of The Cask of Amontillado, film that was made about 20 years ago. And again, lots of debris lying around here, but we did have access to this one room. By the time we finished clearing these places out, we went on to discover several more rooms that lay further back on the site, and we opened it up, so the basement became a much larger area than that we first knew about in those early days. But it was only by digging around and exploring that we rediscovered things that had been filled in, concreted over, almost lost forever. This is our Bill Douglas again, obviously demonstrating something to a group of visitors in the wine bins. There are these 2, you can see them, 2 big arches side by side there. And eventually they would lead us through off to the right to rediscover an enormous great basement kitchen area, which we knew nothing about until about 2017. But we regained it, and these places are now open for everybody to see. Looking back there, beyond that arch there, it was all bricked up and blocked off, and we didn't know that there were more rooms behind there, but we rediscovered them. But at this point, in the early days, around 2000, 2002, somewhere around there, we used this as part of the film set for the Cask of Amontillado. Strange story by Edgar Allan Poe, where the one man who had a grudge against somebody from his childhood lured him down here into these catacombs, and then got him drunk, hit him over the head, and knocked him out, and chained him up at the end of a dead-end tunnel to die. And this is where he bricked him up and walked away and left him to die. This wall was constructed by our Lescaut as part of the film set, with a solid wall behind it. But of course, later on, we opened this up and found more rooms at the back. And that's what the frontage of Williamson's house looks like now. It's all that's left. We're hoping we're going to keep it, but it is under threat of being lost, I'm afraid, if Liverpool City Council get their way, because they say it's unsafe. And we now occupy the site behind. This is our headquarters, 40 to 44 Mason Street. And let's hope that the house frontage remains, but at least we will make sure we keep what lies behind there safe, and all the underground spaces, we'll make sure we don't lose them. So that's about all I've got to show you there. That is Williamson House site, the early days. Thanks for watching.